This video is brought to you by Mubi. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/docinema.
Did you know I'm utterly insane?
Directors love crazy characters. What do I mean by crazy? Well, I would say anything that's extremely out of the ordinary, because when someone is different from the rest, there's conflict, making it interesting for film. Characters with a completely different reality, or those who can no longer maintain themselves in society, create drama. And besides that, it can lead to visually interesting things, like the famous Dutch angle.
Listen, you screwheads.
In this video, we'll go over the concept of madness and see how it has created some of the most iconic characters and movies in the history of cinema.
Here's Johnny!
When introducing madness, a common trope is often the psychiatric institution. The moment a protagonist arrives at an institution, directors love to play around with establishing the location. The 1963 movie Shock Corridor is about a man who is admitted to a psychiatric institution when nothing is actually wrong with him. He enters it to solve a case, but gradually begins taking on mannerisms of his environment and slowly turns mad himself. This movie became a stereotype of how these institutions are portrayed. We see this in the movie 12 Monkeys as well, that extensively uses the Dutch angle.
Yo, Jeffrey!
The slightly tilted camera shot creates a very disorienting and unsettling effect, which kind of fits the mental state of these characters.
Stereo systems with brain-implanted headphones, screwdrivers, miniature built-in radar devices, voice-activated computers.
Take it easy, Jeffrey. Be calm.
Pretty cool fun fact, when you look up the term on Google, the whole screen starts tilting as well. But on a serious note, individuals who are hospitalized for a long period of time undergo behavioral changes and start to mimic their surrounding. This concept is sometimes referred to as shock corridor disease because it influenced a few movies with similar themes, one of which is Shutter Island. And boy does this movie have a plot twist that I will not be covering right now. The 2019 Joker is a variation on this trope, someone who develops psychological problems which eventually turns south. But the difference is he doesn't go to an institution to be admitted, he goes there to collect information about someone who was admitted there. Through his conversation with an employee, it becomes clear that he is not entirely psychologically healthy either.
Was found guilty of endangering the welfare of her own child.
The documents are from his mother, and the employee realizes that Arthur Fleck is her son.
What?
Joker drew a lot of inspiration from Taxi Driver. If there ever was a film made about someone who really goes over the edge, it would be Taxi Driver. Not only is it about someone going insane due to PTSD from the Vietnam War,
You talking to me?
it's also about loneliness. Travis becomes gradually more isolated, working long night shifts as a taxi driver.
Loneliness has followed me my whole life. Everywhere.
And from his monologues, we can make up that he's about to make some rigorous changes in his life.
Here is a man who would not take it anymore. A man who stood up against the scum. From now on, it'll be total organization. Every muscle must be tight.
This brings us to the second trope, isolation. The Lighthouse is another great story of how isolation can lead to characters going insane. Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe play two lighthouse keepers setting off to work at the most far-out lighthouse from the coast. When nobody comes to pick them up, they start losing their sense of time. They are getting names mixed up, get drunk every night, and the light itself becomes this godlike shrine which is the only thing they start to care about.
Who are you again, Tommy? I'm probably a figment of your imagination. This rock is a figment of your imagination too.
The Shining by Kubrick shares a similar approach. Instead, it plays out at an isolated empty hotel in the mountains. Jack Torrance is one of the most iconic examples of a normal man gone psycho, who got so caught up in writing his book that he starts to go delirious. Stanley Kubrick is also known for the famous Kubrick stare, a way of staring into the camera with your head tilted downwards to make a character look psycho. Now, some characters eventually feel pleasure and comfort in their madness. They don't see the point in wanting to be normal again and start repelling normalcy because, according to them, the normal world is the one that's sick. Kubrick's other masterpiece, A Clockwork Orange, takes place in a repressive totalitarian state. This caused violent youth movements to arise as a radical counter-movement, one of which is led by Alex DeLarge.
Hi there!
Well, hello.
After doing literally anything God forbid, he is sentenced with 14 years in prison. The only way he is allowed to leave early is by undergoing an experimental brainwashing technique with what used to be his favorite song, played over and over again, all while watching violent tapes.
You've heard Beethoven before?
Yes! So you're keen on music?
This everlasting battle between individual versus system is also the main drive behind Papillon. After years of imprisonment, psychological distress, and 7 attempts at escaping, Papillon and his friends seem to be left for dead and are sentenced to an island which is basically your last resort. Nobody has ever escaped the island surrounded by ocean, but when Papillon finds a way out, his friend doesn't even want to leave anymore and finds solace in not going back to the regular world, precisely because he is so alienated from it.
I need to stay. For the same reason you have to go. I belong here.
There's this one scene in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest that shows how despite all the limitations of a system, sometimes all it takes is a little bit of creativity to get that taste of freedom. Jack Nicholson plays this sort of free spirit among the mentally ill, because he himself faked his illness so he didn't have to go to prison. In the asylum, they want to watch a simple baseball match, but they are not allowed to. Jack doesn't accept that, so he pretends the game is on and starts acting it all out, causing everyone else to join.
He's in there, he's safe! It's a double, he's in there, Martin! Look at Richardson! It's a home run!
Gentlemen, stop this! Stop this immediately!
There's also those characters who are so out of touch with reality that they create their own imaginary world, or imaginary friend. The Wizard of Oz is about a dream world that Dorothy enters, not because she has a mental disorder, but because she got knocked out by a hurricane. However, the second movie, Return to Oz, raises the question, is the protagonist maybe a bit crazy, or does he just have a wild fantasy?
Would you like to go for a ride, Dorothy?
One of my personal favorites in this trope is Fight Club. The narrator unconsciously creates an alter ego that allows him to escape the restrictions of his boring life. This alter ego is called Tyler Durden and is everything the main character wishes to be. Philosopher Carl Jung called this the shadow self, which contains all the characteristics that we have repressed. Both are good and bad qualities.
Quit screwing around. Take the wheel. Take the wheel.
Look at you! You're pathetic!
Why? Why? What are you talking about?
Very similar, the giant bunny in Donnie Darko represents Donnie's shadow self. However, he is everything he wishes not to be and becomes a monster. Throughout the film, Donnie's hallucinations cause him to go down the wrong path. These movies are both perfect examples of an unreliable narrator that can make us believe the things we see because we experience everything from his subjective point of view. It is also those movies that often have the best plot twist endings, because once you step out of the main character's head, everything starts to fall into place, just like in American Psycho.
No, you didn't.
Patrick Bateman is a wolf in sheepskin, one who has mastered the craft of masking his insanity with his perfectly crafted physique and charisma.
Patrick, it's so elegant. What a wonderful view.
Jean? Sorbet?
No one around him knows or even cares that he is going insane. He wipes out his rival Paul Allen and other people in ridiculous ways, but at some point things start to feel off. The bodies disappear, Paul Allen supposedly was on a holiday, and his secretary finds his diary with absurd drawings, leaving the audience with a question: did he actually do anything, or was it all in his head? Madness of the individual can lead to collective madness and, ultimately, war. In Apocalypse Now, people are driven absolutely crazy by the horrors of war. This movie contains the most absurd scene out of any war film I have ever seen. At one point there's bombs exploding left and right, and what do they decide to do? Perfect time to go for a little surf session.
It's a little risky for R&R! If I say it's safe to surf this beach, Captain, it's safe to surf this beach! Quit hiding! Come on! Surf this fucking place! Let's go, guys! Let's go, That's mine! Fuck off, that's mine! I love the smell of napalm in the morning. It smells like... victory.
In the first 1.5 hours of The Deer Hunter, you have no idea that you're watching a war movie. You see a group of friends growing up together and you really get to know them. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's a hard cut to an explosion and you're right in the middle of war. And that's probably how it happened too. People were living their lives and before you know it, you're in the war. The most famous scenes from the movie are about Russian roulette. This game never actually happened in Vietnam, but it could be used as a metaphor for playing with your life for money. Years go by, and when the war is sort of over, Robert De Niro returns to Vietnam because one of his friends is still left behind, played by Christopher Walken. Robert De Niro goes looking for him, and then he finally finds him.
Don't you recognize me? Huh? Don't you recognize me? Huh? Nicky, I love you. You're my friend. What are you doing?
He doesn't recognize him anymore, and the only way Robert De Niro can confront him to bring him back is by sitting in front of him and playing Russian roulette again. Everything they had experienced comes together at the end. Then, last but not least, there are the utterly insane, the characters with little to no humanity left, the extreme and ultimate of mankind. We talked about Patrick Bateman already, but it all leads back to one character. Norman Bates from the 1960 movie Psycho. Psycho's shower scene still stands today as one of the most influential scenes in the horror genre. It is so famous because it simply never happened before in cinema. The amount of shots, the usage of point of view, getting so up close to involve the audience more intimately within the scene. Alfred Hitchcock allowed the audience to become a subjective character, forcing us to recognize our own neurosis and psychological inadequacies. He makes us constant voyeurs, lurking for our prey. From that point on, murder was going to be an acceptable part of entertainment, said American psycho novelist Bret Easton Ellis, and this has paved the way for many modern psychos. Lou Bloom in Nightcrawler is a man so driven by becoming the most successful cameraman for the news stations that he not only films the crime scenes, he invades them. He front-runs them, and eventually even causes them. He will literally manipulate and sabotage anybody, even his own intern.
The ad didn't say what the job was.
It's a fine opportunity for some lucky someone.
To make sure that he gets out as the top predator. These characters often have their own laws and moral codes, like Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men. They once showed all the Psycho movies to people who really know about them, and they pointed to this film as the one that comes closest to the truth. The famous coin flip scene shows that Anton leaves everything up to faith. Heads, you live. Tails, you don't.
What's the most you ever lost on a coin toss?
Sir?
The most you ever lost on a coin toss?
I don't know. I couldn't say.
In the movie Seven, John Doe is working on his magnum opus, his life's work to eradicate those who represent one of the 7 deadly sins. Kevin Spacey delivers such a stone-cold and eerie performance when he confesses the last sin with a straight face.
Seems that envy is my sin.
Oh, what's in the box? What's in the f***ing box?
Just told
you. You lie! You're a f***ing liar! Shut up!
That's what he wants.
But the most famous one in film history is probably Hannibal Lecter, played by Anthony Hopkins. Again, we see the trope we talked about at the beginning of entering the institution, but not only are the people here crazy, they're also dangerous. Everybody else is behind bars, but Hannibal is behind glass. Why glass? Well, there comes a moment when the camera is so up close that it looks like he can just step out of his cage and grab her. That glass wall becomes invisible. During their dialogue, the shots are framed closer and closer. We start off wide, then medium, then close, and eventually extreme close, to the point where he's standing right in front of you. For actors, it's a dream to play someone who is insane. You are addressed on your entire toolbox of skill sets as an actor when you have to act out almost every emotion and mental state within one film.
Oh yeah?
Sometimes it's the small details, other times it's the exuberant outbursts. It's no coincidence that so many Oscars have been won by actors who had to play someone with a mental disorder or who became insane.
And the Oscar goes to Anthony Hopkins in The Silence of the Lambs.
Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo.
Brad Pitt, 12 Monkeys.
Joaquin Phoenix, Joker.
Javier Bardem in No Country for Old Men.
Thank you to the Coens for being crazy enough to think that I could do that and put one of the most horrible haircuts on history over my head.
So I guess that's enough madness for today. If you like this video and want to watch more movies with similar themes, definitely check out Holy Motors, High Life, and City of God, which are now showing on Mubi. Mubi is a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. Every day you'll get to discover a new movie from iconic directors and upcoming auteurs. With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected, so it's like your own personal film festival, streaming anytime, anywhere.
I work anytime, anywhere.
We work Jewish holidays?
Anytime, anywhere.
You can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/docinema. That's mubi.com/docinema for an entire month of great cinema for free.